Hello everyone, welcome again for today's lesson. Today is a very beautiful day. Thank you for coming for this lesson. My name is Mr. Muloki. We are going to do our normal lesson for English. And before we start looking at what we're going to do today, we are going to revise and see what is it that we did last time. Uh, Unfortunately, I may not, the setup in which I have, I cannot, walk, stand and walk around. So we'll just have to do it this way because it's the most appropriate way for me. What did we do last time we had a lesson like this? Let's hear from you what you can remember about, what you can recall about the lesson that we had last time. Yes, it was listening and speaking. What were we listening to? Yes, it was a story. It was an oral narrative, a short oral narrative that I sent you to go and watch, and then we talked about it. What did you gather about the narrative? Yes, that it was a story that was supposed to look for features of narratives. What are the animals that were involved in the story? Yes, it was the ant and it was the dove, and it was about being helpful. Did you learn something about the story? Did you talk about the moral lessons in the story? Yes, we mentioned that it's important that you help someone. When someone helps you, it's also very important for you to also help that person. Can we just go through the features that we talked about in the story from everyone? Let's get different ways in which we look at the features of the story. Yes, we talked about opening and closing formula. What else did we mention? The use of fantasy. We talked about use of fantasy. We said that some of those things have come from imagination, that they're not real life things. What else? Personification. That's a very good feature. We talked about personification. We said that sometimes the animals actually act like human beings, and they make things look like human beings. They actually mimic what human beings do, and that does not really happen to people. So that's not really happen to animals. So that's personification. What else did you mention? Yes, moral lesson. We say that every story has something that we can learn from each. And I'm going to share something for us. I'm going to share something that we can use to go through this story. We mentioned that different stories have different moral lessons, and we also mentioned that today we might today we might start looking at different things about narratives. Today, we're going to look at different types of oral narratives. But before that, we can just go through a few things that we mentioned. And we talked about use of opening and closing formulas, we can see. We also talked about fantasy, which we actually talked about. We talked about timelessness, that we don't know the specific day that the story was done. And there's also moral lessons. We talked about moral lessons. We talked about use of dialogue, that there should be some conversation between one animal and another one. And we also talked about use of personification, which is also struck use of animal characters, because personification and use of animal characters is the same feature. And we said that all these things, when they brought together, when we find them in any story, we know that whatever we are talking about is an oral narrative, and most of them are common in oral narratives. Thank you for that. Thank you for reminding me about what we did last time, and thank you for remembering all those. Today, we are looking at something different. Our objectives are a little bit different. Today, we are going to look at types of narratives. We want a situation where when we get any narrative, we can tell that this narrative, we can give it a name, that we can say that this narrative is either it's a fable, or this oral narrative is a trickster, or this oral narrative is a legend. So we're going to look at what is it that will make a story to be a fable, what is it that will make a story to be a human tale, what is it that will make a story to be a trickster. So today we're going to read different stories, and we're going to to identify them and say this one is a fable, this one is a trickster, this one is a legend because of this specific reason. And as you remember, I had given you a story that you're supposed to watch so that we can talk about it. But before you tell me about that story, we're going to look at just the general types of narratives. And one of them is a fable, as you can see from the board, that whatever I've put on the board, one of them is a fable, the other one is a human tale, the other one is a trickster story, the other one is an explanatory story, the other one is a myth, the other one is a legend, others are dilemma stories, and others are ogre stories. I think you've heard of things to do with monsters. So before I even go to the deep, to the meaning of all this, we're going to revisit our story and look at what are the things that we can say about our story. And maybe from all these lists that we have, we can actually now tell what type of story we have. So let's go back to our story and the story that we watched, and tell me what you think about the story and what was going on. Yes, let's talk about our story, the story that we watched as a class, and we see and we talk about it. Let me hear what the story is about. Yes, the story is about the tiger. The tiger. What was so important about the tiger? Oh yes, the tiger changed its skin. Its skin it was plain, but now the skin changed and it had some stripes. That's good. What can you say about that? How did the tiger get stripes? How did it change how did this tiger change its skin? Let me hear from you. Yes, that someone tied it or on a tree, and as it was struggling to get out of the tree, the stripes, actually the skin that was smooth got to have some stripes, just like my jacket looks like. The tiger was actually plain like this, but now when it was tied, it had some stripes because of being tied on a tree for a very long time, and because it was forcing itself to get out of the tree. Oh, that's good. Now, what does the story explain? What generally does the story explain? Okay, what do you think? Yes, the story explains that because the tiger did not have those things before, and now it has those stripes, it actually explains why all tigers have stripes. So out of all these, the fables, the human tales, the trickster story, the legends, the myths, the dilemma, and the older stories, explanatory, where do we fix our story? Yes, it's an explanatory story. It explains about the behavior. It explains why some animals behave the way they are. Good. You see, we're going to look at each and every story. We're going to read stories and categorize them according to what we have. And we're going to look at the meaning that the story brings out, and we see where we can fix these stories. So after now looking at the etiological or the explanatory story, we're going to look at a trickster story. We're going to look at another story and see where we can fix it. Thank you. Let's continue from there. Let's continue from there and see what we can say about our different story. I'm trying to bring in a different slide here so that we can see the story and we talk about it. That's the talk about it. So whatever we've seen was whatever we talked about is an explanatory story. Now we're going to look at a different story and check whether we can categorize it under probably a trickster story or a myth or a legend or we talked about explanatory or a dilemma story. So let's play another story and see where we can categorize it.